Hello, good morning. We're here with Fletcher Wheaton. He's broker associate at REmexico Real Estate. Hi, Fletcher. Good morning.
Good morning, Alejandro. How you doing?
Good, you?
Pretty good.
Yeah, looking forward to catching up on the market, pre-construction, negotiating in this kind of market. So we can start with pre-construction. So it's been a huge part of the Cabo real estate story in recent years, especially after COVID, right?
Yeah.
But now the picture has changed. I'm just curious about your perspective on this.
This is interesting. If you take the Tezal area where you've had the majority of construction happening in Cabo San Lucas. So if you just kind of focus on that area,
Yeah.
which you would consider, kind of ground zero to see how the situation is playing out. There's a lot of situations where in this particular market, for example, in 2020 and 2021, you could basically buy a condo, a two-bedroom ocean view condo for $300,000, and it's worth $400,000 at delivery, right? So you have that risk and reward scenario. Now with the price of land, the price of labor, everything's gone up. So that is a lot closer to that 400 number now, right? And my point is that now you have these people that have bought at the lower price and are able to sell. So you're actually, the delta between the pre-con and the built out is almost even in a lot of situations. So the point would be, why would you take on the risk of a pre-construction unit when you can buy something that's built out and it has title, it might even have furniture. So these are the things, and you don't have the headaches dealing with getting utilities hooked up and all this stuff. You're not a guinea pig just being first delivery. So these are the things that I'm seeing. Now, there's a whole kind of plethora of projects and each one's different. So you don't throw everything in, just like everybody tries to say, oh, Tezal. It's just not true, right? So you have to get into the micro data too to really see which projects are different than other ones.
Are there good deals still to be made?
Yes, 100%. So look,
Pre-construction.
we've been going back and forth on this. I have an LOI on pre-construction going out right now. Okay. We toured this last weekend, so it's been a week, right? And we're going back and forth. Now, if this was 2020 or 2021, they'd be like, hey, if you don't buy this unit, like, I got a buyer. If they buy this, then the price goes up and you're going to have to get a unit on a floor lower for the same price, something like that, right? And this was a real thing. Now what you're seeing is just from the time it's taken us to do this, and I've kind of been playing it that way just to see if they're going to be like, hey, we have a buyer. They don't. This project it's a couple of towers. So you're halfway through it. Risk is pretty much off. Good developer. Now they've sold units and those buyers paid a price, right?
Yes.
They can't really go below that. So you can get a certain discount depending on what the project is. But what I want to say for negotiation purposes is that what you can't see that pings on the MLS is also negotiable. We're talking upgrades. We're talking maybe HOA fees. Maybe we're talking furniture. So there's a whole slew of things that you can negotiate right now that don't show up. And the developer is comfortable with that because it doesn't lower the price to the public that you see, where the person that bought right here is all of a sudden, oh my God, now I'm getting underbid. You're selling units for less than what I paid for.
But how big, how substantial is this, perks that you can negotiate? Is it really something that's...
I'll put it like this. I think in a certain situation, 7% to 9%.
in these kinds of upgrades?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm saying total purchase price, So in this particular situation, I was talking to somebody and they were able to negotiate, numbers around then. And each project is different, right? Each developer is different, because we toured a bunch and one of the agents let us know, he's like, Fletcher, this guy is not going to budge. In order to get a better discount, you're going to put down more money. And this is what it comes out to. So there's a combination of maybe you put down more money, which, maybe your attorney or your agent is going to say it's not a good idea, depending on where the project is and what's going on, right? So you can put higher down payment, upgrades, discounts, things like that. And that's what I'm saying is you didn't have this. It was the opposite.
Yes.
And one of the things for negotiation is time. That's what I'm saying. I've been kind of purposely dragging this one out just to see. And I told my buyer, he like agrees with me. And I said, look, if this was to ping the unit we're looking at, there's another one right there too.
Yeah.
You know, but they haven't been able to do that. So it's a different market. Each project is different. Each area is different, but it's definitely a time where it's been a buyer's market, right? But if you're going to go the pre-construction route because you like that particular project, you can get these discounts that don't show up on paper.
And how used to negotiating on real estate deals are your clients? Like they come from the US?
Oh, this guy's commercial.
Or
He's a commercial real estate guy in Los Angeles, so he's pretty well versed.
is he representative of?
No, but I mean, look, people are smart. Your agent can let you know this, right?
Yeah.
So I would not feel comfortable knowing that I can get this guy a couple more percentage points lower in price. If I could do it, why wouldn't I, you know?
Exactly.
And it just insulates everything.
So what are the limits to this kind of leverage that the buyer has right now? What's the speaking in general?
No, I think those numbers are like really pushing it, what I told you. So it depends on what's going on. You know, developers have their pricing. They know. You know, they have a pro forma and they have their everything baked in. They're holding on to units themselves a lot of times, you know, friends and family. They've already baked all that stuff in, so they have their pricing. So there's a point to where they're going to say absolutely not.
You mentioned that the delta between risk and reward is decreasing, right?
Yeah.
In pre-construction.
Pre-construction versus something that's built out.
Versus something built out. But still, you go to Tesal, just the example you mentioned, and there's still a sense that developers are pushing aggressively with new projects, constructions. Do you think that's true? Like
Yes.
just that's my impression when I drew.
Yeah, no. So look, I don't understand it. We look at this, okay? So this is, and we're talking more about the condo market, but if you're looking at this, I think you have days on market. You have inventory, months of inventory at like 28 months.
Yes, and this is houses and condos in all of Los Cabos, not only.
Okay,
All right, it's all of Los Cabos, but still, I mean, it gives you an idea.
Yeah. So I have to sit here and be like, then why is somebody launching a new project? Exactly. I told you this. We were approached by a project. We did not accept it. And there was a lot of pushback from agents on my team. That is now 130 days on the MLS without anything. So I'm sitting here and I'm like, look, I'm not trying to like rub it in your face, but I told you this was priced too high. That project is not selling, and it's a good project. They just had the pricing too high. You know, maybe 3 lots in front of it, you have another project launching.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting here, I'm kind of scratching my head. I'm like, what's going on?
So what's going on? What's going on
I think it's ego.
head?
It's ego.
Well, but ego, and then you have to. It's
out of town. Yeah, but it's an out of town developer. So they come in. Hey, we did this in Tulum.
Yeah,
we did this here. We know what we're doing. I mean, like, man, I heard this like 2 years ago and it didn't work. And now you even have more competition. You know, so and look, there's a project in San Jose and they were doing like a launch, and an agent, I said, look, be careful. And he said, look, and I was joking with another agent. I'm like, man, all you got to do is go buy a shovel at Home Depot and then have a photo opportunity, and that's your groundbreaking ceremony. That doesn't really mean, you know what I mean? Let's fast forward in 2 years and see what really happens. It is a very interesting market in that respect. And no agent wants to bring somebody to that. They don't even want to bring you to something that is going to be delayed a year. Because then it's so much more work, you know, it's on them. That's my point, is that like, hey, you can be negotiable on a lot of these projects. You can be negotiable on built out product too, but you just got to make sure that you know the correct projects.
So in addition to pricing, which I guess is the main one, but what other criteria do you look at before accepting a project?
I mean, there's a lot.
Like what?
No, Well, supply and demand and how the market is. The same project that we turned down, if that was on the other side, I think that's something we would have accepted. There's just too much inventory. And at that point, it's a commodity, dude.
Yeah.
You know, it's just supply and demand. Nobody cares about the fact that, oh, you got really cool architecture. If they can go right here and say, hey, this one's for this price, and it'll be comfortable. And then you're going to have a lot more issues with the municipality for condo regime, which gives you ownership, and CFE. It's a battle, you know. If CFE was getting hooked up at projects, which is electricity, was taking a month, now it's taking 6 months.
Okay.
And I kind of went off topic from your question.
Okay. If you're going to take a project, like what's your ideal project to right now? If someone like came here and pitched you a project to sell, what?
We sold that out. You know, well, I mean, there's 5 units left out of 16. Look, in hindsight,
that one a good project. I don't know if you want
pricing, I'm not going to name it. Pricing, supply and demand, the fact that the neighbors were known. And on top of it, dude, we did a joint venture for that. So they were able, the owner of the land contributed the land, so we didn't have to pay up for the land and then increase the pricing. So the landowner got condo inventory versus the sale, and she actually made out like 2 times better than if she had sold the land. But the whole point of it was supply and demand. It was unique, but I'm telling you now, in that area too, there's about to be more stuff. So we just happened to hit it. Pricing a project pre-construction, I think, is actually almost more of an art than a science, you know, because there's just so many factors. You can be right and still end up being wrong, right? If you launch the right project at the wrong time, it doesn't matter.
And it's interesting because it's supply and demand, but on a micro level. No, it's on the area, the specific area that the project is located in. Right, and then we have numbers that we're gonna talk about, but they're macro and they're interesting too. You have to get to
The other thing,
neighborhood level.
yeah, the other thing I would say about a developer too is like, what is their track record? Who are they? You know, what have they done? And I've seen that track record not translate, but generally it's a very good indication of who they are. You know.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And here I have some figure from the MLS, and they're kind of focused on the higher end market and the more like mid lower end market. So in Los Cabos, the whole of Los Cabos, San Jose, the corridor, and San Lucas, inventory above 1 million. We're talking about houses and condos. It went up 73% from 2023 to 2025. And I'm comparing only the months of January to May.
Okay.
Yeah, a year. Okay.
Okay.
And the pending listings went 16% up. So that's a good increase. But but the increase in inventory is huge, right?
Yeah.
And then below $600,000, the inventory went up 25% in these 2 years, but the number of pending listings went down 35%.
Yeah.
So
what about the close though? I think I don't think pending's really
okay. So the close in the higher end went down 24%.
Okay.
Close below the 600 went down 36%.
Okay.
Okay, so
that's more telling. Well, look, a lot of the high end stuff is not on the MLS, right?
Yeah.
Like super high end. That's not shocking, but like look,
1 million up.
Yeah. So we're building up inventory right now.
Yes.
And I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, look, it depends on what. I'm not talking about like adding pre-construction projects that if they don't sell well, they're not going to get built out, and then you have a ruin. You know, one joke is we already have enough ruins in Mexico with the Mayans and the, so we don't need any more ruins. Now, if you have built out good inventory, that's in my opinion, if you look at the United States right now, it's kind of the opposite, man. Like nobody's really trading. People are kind of on edge. Housing is still at all-time highs, insurance and taxes.
So the inventory is very tight.
Yeah, in most markets, and it's just like people are sitting on mortgages, and if they sell it, then they're gonna have to pay, 2 or 3 times more in mortgage and insurance and taxes. So it's a tricky thing. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. And once again, it's a good thing for a buyer's market, right?
Yes.
So if you're looking to buy, I don't think it's a bad time depending on what it is. But I think there's definitely been a lot more inventory added,
Yes.
you know. It'll be very interesting to see what happens on the high end side, because I do think that's been a significant part of the market. I think those people are starting to hold off a bit.
The
And
buyers.
yes, and I think part of that is you really have a lag here, I believe, of like 6 to 9 months of what happens. That's a couple of things. One is the closing process here is generally longer, right? 3 months, sometimes could be even more depending on the deal, right? Also, I think you have a lot of people that are like down here and they're like, I don't necessarily believe what's happening. So I personally think you will see a softening. And I've had conversations where there's a golf course community oceanside on the corridor, which I would say is the highest end in Cabo. And I've heard they are trying to oust the company that really put it all together because they're just getting fed up with the fees. And if you see this, it's happening in like San Jose, like Crancier's jacked up fees. And they're like, hey, we're not as bad as this one. So there's 2 others. And like, guess what they're gonna do? There's only one way. And I think at a certain point, I've seen people they're looking to trade out of a community and get into another one, only for this one a couple years later to do the exact same thing. So you're kind of pricing out the people that bought in the beginning there. But that's just something where I think you're gonna get a little fatigue with that, because you get to these really high-end communities and this is FU money. They're third, fourth, fifth. This is almost something for their kids to go use type thing, It's like almost just like a diversification, like, hey, well, I got this money sitting here. That'll be interesting, but I do see that softening. I mentioned this to somebody in our office the other day and they didn't really agree. On the other end though, like the sub-million, it's going to be really interesting because these are the buyers that were really sensitive to any economic news, tariffs, wars, things like this. It just seems like that volatility is not going anywhere. So, and we're in the summer now, so we'll just see. It's gonna, I think, year over year compared to last year, which was a good year, we're still above last year's numbers. So everything's said and done, like you can't paint a Chicken Little scenario that the sky's falling, because we're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Compared all things. It's just there's a lot of people here that are not making any money because it's not the deals that they were used to making a couple years ago are no longer pinging right now.
What types of deals? Like pre-construction?
Yeah, pre-construction like Tazal. And even so, I'm curious, there's a community we're representing and somebody furnished out the place and it was for rent. And I'm just really curious to see how much that one's gonna rent for, because you have a lot more inventory coming on where people, so whether that's Airbnb, whether that's a long-term rental, it'll be really interesting to see kind of how the market resets.
Yeah. Also, the general narrative here is that Cabo is a luxury market, and people, I think, are betting a lot on that, on making it even more of a luxury market.
Yeah.
Do you think that's actually true?
No, well, that's what people are doing. If you look at the East Cape, my idea for the East Cape, and we're gonna be doing this, is to get affordable inventory. But every person you talk to in the East Cape is looking to do like another Costa Palmas. And when you start looking at some of these like higher end communities, especially when you're more off grid, it's a battle. But everybody's trying. If you just take the East Cape, for example, most people are going to go in there and they're going to try to do a product that is similar to like a beach community in Cabo, but it's modern. So you have a price point where your homes are, 2 million.
Yes.
And I think that the East Cape needs more of a, maybe like a Ventana style, where you have like affordable homes and a community out there. So I think that would sell better, but everybody's that I've really spoken to is looking to do the alternative, which is more high end. So inevitably that's where like most people are looking.
And what's their thinking? Like they're looking at the U.S. economy, the U.S. market, and then they say, therefore, I will build something that's 2 million up. Okay, no. What's their look?
They're not, I don't think they're looking at that. It's just like, hey, this is a beautiful area. You know, if they can sell this for 5 in Cabo, I can do it for 2 right here. But it's more of the fact that it's a big investment due to lack of infrastructure. I think they just, if you're going to make that bet, you want to make it worth your while.
Okay.
And this is the other thing too, is I'm telling you, we have multiple JV opportunities with landowners out in the East Cape, and it's crazy how these have come across the desk. We're looking at that pretty actively right now in a solid way, because there's really, once again, last time I checked, which is about a month ago, there were 16 condos listed on the MLS in the East Cape, and there had been 1 that had sold this year.
Yeah.
And then if you look at Tezal, I think there's something like 500, but then you have these developments like the one we were talking about, where they probably have close to 100 in inventory, but maybe there's only 3 or 4 listed on the MLS.
Yeah.
So, you can get lost in the numbers too, to a certain extent.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I think it's really kind of like, if you're going to do it, let's make it worth our while. And then on top of it, I think, once you meet enough of the development community, and this is not an insult, but I think in order to be able to pull off a development, you need to have some level of ego in a good way, right? Because you're like, nah, I mean, look at Owen and doing Danzante. It's like everybody told him he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
You have to have some confidence.
Just be single-minded and
have some vision to pull that off. The risk increases dramatically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's all I'm saying, is that people come down to Mexico in general and have a bad experience. There's no reason for that to happen. And if you're going to be looking at pre-construction right now, just make sure you know what the project is through an agent, right? Because there's plenty of good agents. The agent that I'm working with on the other side, really good. He knows me, so there's like no BS going on. There's plenty of really good agents here that can tell you
definitely
about a project, right? So just be mindful of that. The last thing you want to do is get yourself into a situation where you're putting your money in jeopardy. You're putting like maybe your financial, your family's plan to have a vacation home in jeopardy. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. One more question. So if you look back 3 or 4 years ago and now, do you see a shift in the leads that you're getting? Like, are people asking more about other places other than Cabo? Or like, how would you like quantify that? And what places are getting the most attention?
So look, Cabo, I think you go back, decades ago, 20 years, 30 years ago, and it was more like a town, like a village. So, and it had this like really, and that's what, when you go out to the East Cape, that's kind of like the feeling now, right? Same thing on the Pacific side. So it moves up the peninsula, right? So there's a couple things behind that though. Some people, Cabo's gotten expensive, So some people are looking to markets like La Paz or Loreto, and Loreto is not necessarily cheap. I think Loreto is shaping itself up to be quite a luxury destination in itself. But a lot of people, that's the most year over year, by far the most explosive growth on the MLS right now is Loreto, but it's just because like they didn't have much. It's kind of reminiscent of La Paz last year. So I think you have a lot of people, if they're looking in Cabo, or they were, maybe in 21, right?
Yeah.
And now they're like, man, that place that I was looking at that was 300 is now like 400, and now they have furniture, so it's like listed at 440. But hey, look at this place here, and that could be in La Paz, and it's the price that it was in Cabo a couple years ago. So I think that's one thing, and I think that can be a mistake if you've never really been there, right? But all in all, I think people are looking outside of Cabo, and that doesn't mean that Cabo always has its people, right? It's always going to be the destination that attracts all this, and
it's still developing, it's still growing. It's by no means the end.
And most Americans, they might say they want to go to, but like, why when I go up to Loreto, when we go film, we got to swing by Costco and pick up 20 steaks for somebody?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
you might say you like But then when you get into it and you're like, okay, healthcare, able to get on a flight and get home that same afternoon, there's a lot of things that people might say they really want, but at the end of the day, that convenience that you have in Cabo, you might not find in the other places.
Yes. Fletcher, what are we not talking about that we should be talking about right now?
It's just interesting. Everybody has an opinion, right? Myself included. It's just kind of interesting to see what's happening in the States right now. I was on the phone with somebody a couple days ago, and they're just talking about how all the smart money they know in the Colorado area is just kind of holding put. So it'll be very interesting because at the end of the day, our biggest markets are Texas, California, Colorado, West Coast. It'll just be interesting to see how everything plays out. But at the end of the day, there's so much going on here in a good way. But I do you have anything in your mind that you're thinking that?
No, I guess just to comment on that, I think there's at least two responses to this uncertainty that's going on in the States. One is stay put, and the other one is to actively diversify, right? So I guess some people are like, well, I don't want.
No, look, like that's what I'm saying.
And some
This deal that I'm working on right now, very smart guy, quiet but very smart, and very calculated. And we're kind of going about this surgically,
yes,
and we're getting what we can get, and I think when he gets his property, he's going to look good and he's going to be comfortable coming down here since he's been coming down here for a while, regardless of, whether there's a war in the Middle East or not, so, and I think he understands that, and also I think he would understand that his home market of Los Angeles is probably not the same place that he would get this kind of same type of product.
exactly.
Where, he's getting like a luxury place that he can come down whenever he wants to and use. So, but I see both sides of it. If somebody's saying, hey, it's soft, we're going to hold put, I'm not going to argue with it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that you have the potential to get some really good deals right now.
For sure. Okay, Fletcher. Thanks for the conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Alejandro.